The city of Lysara stretched across cliffs and towers, its buildings shining in the soft light of dawn. Between the metallic spires and glass bridges, small gardens clung to terraces, and drones flew quietly, maintaining the city's order. Life in Lysara was a mix of technology and nature. Humans lived with bio-engineered creatures, and one of the rarest among them were the dragon hatchlings. The hatchlings were small, barely larger than a human child's hand. Their scales shimmered in pale gold and green, their wings delicate, and their eyes bright with curiosity. They could not breathe fire yet, but their intelligence was surprising. Scientists had nurtured them for years in a secure facility at the top of the city, believing that humans and dragons could learn from one another. One morning, the alarms rang across the facility. Red lights flashed, and a low hum of emergency drones filled the air. Scientists ran through the hallways, panic written on their faces. Dr. Leora, the head caretaker of the hatchlings, gasped as she reached the hatchling room. The small nests were empty. Not a single hatchling remained. "They're gone," she whispered, her voice trembling. "All of them." The staff looked around in disbelief. Doors were locked, windows sealed, and security drones had patrolled the area all night. Yet somehow the hatchlings had vanished. Outside the facility, news spread quickly. Citizens whispered about the missing creatures. The hatchlings were rare, almost legendary. The idea that they could disappear without a trace seemed impossible. People speculated about rogue AI, thieves, or predators from the cliffs, but no one had evidence. Kale, a human mechanic, was far from the chaos. He worked in his small workshop in the lower district, a cluttered space filled with tools, metal parts, and half-finished machines. Kyle was known for his skill with machines and his gentle nature with animals. He could calm the stray drones that lost their signals and even coax small robotic birds to fly in formation. When he heard about the missing hatchlings over the citywide announcement, he frowned. "No predator could take them," he said softly to himself. "And why would anyone steal them? They're too small to profit from." He wiped his hands on his oil-stained apron and stepped outside. The air was cool and sharp with the smell of metal and sea spray. Kyle walked along the streets, watching people stare at the sky, hoping to see any sign of the dragons. He noticed something that others had missed. A faint shimmer on the street below, almost like tiny metallic scales. Kyle knelt and examined the ground. Small scratches marked the metal pavement, shallow but deliberate. They seemed to form a trail. He touched the scratches, feeling the faint warmth left behind. "They didn't just wander off," he muttered. "They went somewhere. On purpose." He decided to follow the trail. It led through the lower districts, where buildings leaned over narrow alleys and pipes and cables twisted like vines. Drones flew overhead, scanning the streets, but none seemed to notice the trail. Kyle moved carefully, his eyes following each mark, his mind piecing together a puzzle. The trail took him to a marketplace filled with vendors selling mechanical parts and small gadgets. Children ran between the stalls, chasing small mechanical birds that whistled as they flew. Kyle paused at a stall where tiny glass ornaments reflected the morning sun. Something sparkled in the corner of his eye. He knelt and saw a small claw mark on the edge of a glass panel, one that was far too small for a human hand. "They're clever," Kyle whispered. "And careful." He continued, following the trail up narrow stairways and across bridges that connected the older districts. The city below was busy with morning activity, but above the air grew quieter. The hum of distant machines replaced chatter and laughter. Kyle climbed higher, tracing scratches that seemed to glow faintly under the sunlight. By midday, Kale reached an abandoned warehouse near the cliffs. Its doors were heavy, rusted, and slightly ajar. A soft breeze carried a faint scent of warmth and metal, an unusual combination. Kale pushed the door open and stepped inside. Shadows stretched across the floor, broken by shafts of light from broken windows. At first, the warehouse seemed empty. Then, Kale noticed something strange. Tiny imprints on the dusty floor suggested movement. He followed them, careful not to disturb the marks. The trail led to the far corner, where a pile of metal scraps lay. Among the scraps, something flickered, golden scales reflecting the sunlight. Kyle froze. "The hatchlings," he whispered. Suddenly, he heard a soft fluttering above him. He looked up and saw movement on a raised platform. Tiny wings flapped, and small eyes peered down at him. The hatchlings were there, but they were not afraid. They seemed curious, almost cautious, watching him like he was a puzzle to solve. Kyle stepped closer slowly. "It's okay," he said in a calm voice. "I won't hurt you." One hatchling took a tentative step forward, testing the air. Its wings stretched, and it let out a soft chirp. Kale smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest. "I think you chose this place for a reason," he said. He spent hours observing them, learning their patterns. The hatchlings moved in coordinated ways, as if they understood the warehouse better than anyone. They hid among scraps of metal, climbed beams, and flapped their wings to test the air currents. Kyle realized they were not lost. They were exploring, learning, and maybe even protecting themselves. As the sun began to set, Kale built a small platform with scraps from his workshop. He placed soft metal sheets for warmth and protection. The hatchlings gradually approached, letting him guide them onto the platform. By nightfall, they were resting there, calm and safe. Kyle sat back and looked at them. The city below glowed with lights, and drones flew overhead, searching for the missing creatures. No one would find them here, he realized. The hatchlings had chosen him, not because he forced them, but because he understood them. He thought about the scientists, about Dr. Leora's panic, and the citizens' fear. He smiled faintly. Humans could be clever, resourceful, and caring. That was why the hatchlings trusted him. They recognized it. Kale made a decision. He would protect them until the situation was clear, and he would figure out why they had disappeared. There was more to this than simple curiosity. The trail of metallic scales, the coordinated movements, they hinted at intelligence beyond what anyone expected. As night fell, Kale covered the hatchlings gently with soft sheets of metal, creating a warm, safe nest. They huddled together on his makeshift platform, their small bodies glowing faintly in the dark. Kale watched them, feeling a strange sense of connection. For hours he sat silently, thinking about the future. The hatchlings were not just creatures to be studied. They were companions, learners, and perhaps even teachers. Humans had a unique ability to understand and nurture, and in return, the hatchlings had shown trust. The city below slept, unaware of the secret in the warehouse. Above, the stars blinked softly, and the wind whispered across the cliffs. Kale knew this was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge both humans and dragons in ways no one could imagine. He leaned back against the wall, exhausted but alert. The hatchlings stirred occasionally, chirping softly, as if acknowledging their new protector. Kale smiled. "We'll figure this out together," he said quietly. And for the first time since the alarms rang that morning, the city's chaos felt distant. Here, in the quiet warehouse, humans and dragons shared a moment of trust, curiosity, and hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, Kale allowed himself to rest. The hatchlings were safe, and that was all that mattered. In a world of machines, drones, and towering cities, a small group of humans and dragons had found something far more important: connection. The morning sun stretched over Lysara, turning the metallic city into a glowing mosaic of silver, gold, and copper. The cliffs below glimmered with the reflection of the distant ocean, and drones zipped quietly across the skies, attending to their daily tasks. In the lower district, the city was alive with people and small mechanical devices moving in perfect rhythm. Kyle stood at the entrance of his workshop, watching the city below. The hatchlings were still sleeping on the metal platform he had built. He did not disturb them. Instead, he studied the faint shimmer of their scales as the sunlight touched them. Something tugged at his mind, a feeling that the hatchlings were not simply hiding for safety. They were leading him to something. He waited until the hatchlings began to stir, stretching tiny wings and chirping softly. Kale gently encouraged them onto the platform he carried. They climbed onto it willingly, their small claws gripping the metal as he lifted them with care. Their trust was remarkable. Humans rarely earned such trust so quickly. Kale stepped outside, heading toward the industrial district where the trail of metallic scales had begun. The city's hum changed here. Machines whirred and hissed, and the air carried a faint smell of oil and metal. He followed the shimmer carefully, keeping his eyes on the small signs. Scratches on pipes, marks on walls, tiny prints in dust and grime. The trail led through narrow alleys filled with abandoned equipment. Most humans ignored these places, but Kale noticed every detail. The small drag marks, the way shadows fell over the marks, and the occasional faint chirp that hinted the hatchlings were watching him from above. As he moved, Kale began to see a pattern in their path. The scratches formed symbols, almost like a code. Some marks repeated in short bursts, others in longer sequences. It was as if the hatchlings were communicating with him, not in words, but in movement. His mind worked quickly, trying to understand their logic. By midday, Kale reached a section of the city where old transport drones and delivery bots had been decommissioned. Rusted arms and wheels lay scattered like broken trees in a forest. The hatchlings fluttered above, testing air currents and landing carefully on safe spots. One of them, a slightly larger hatchling with bright amber eyes, hovered near Kyle, watching his reaction closely. Kyle knelt, scanning the ground. There were tiny scratches on a metal panel. He traced them with his finger. "You're not lost," he murmured. "You're leading me somewhere. I just have to figure out where." He spent hours following the subtle trail. The hatchlings moved in ways humans could barely predict. Sometimes they flew ahead, then retreated, ensuring Kale stayed on the path. Their intelligence fascinated him. Each flap of their wings, each tiny chirp, seemed intentional. They were not just animals. They were learners, observers, creatures capable of understanding and making decisions. As the sun climbed higher, Kale noticed a faint flicker on a distant wall. He moved closer and saw a series of metallic reflections forming a pattern. He crouched and observed carefully. The hatchlings were marking a path through light and shadow, creating signals that could only be interpreted by someone patient enough to notice. "This is incredible," Kale whispered. "You're teaching me as much as I'm watching you." Following the trail further, he reached the edge of an old transport station, a forgotten part of Lysara where no humans ventured often. The station's doors were heavy and corroded, but the hatchlings did not hesitate. They hovered near a small vent above one of the doors, chirping and flapping gently. Kyle examined the vent. It led to a narrow maintenance tunnel that ran underneath the city. He smiled. "You've been hiding from humans, but not from me." He carefully opened the vent and slipped inside, carrying the hatchlings on his platform. The tunnel was dim, lit by weak emergency lights, and smelled faintly of oil and damp metal. The hatchlings chirped softly, guiding him further along. Kyle noticed more signs of their intelligence. They seemed to recognize safe paths, avoiding broken panels and loose wiring. They reacted to his presence, adjusting their flight patterns to keep him from getting hurt. It was as if they had learned to protect themselves and him. Hours passed as Kale followed the tunnel. The hatchlings moved with confidence, leading him through twists and turns that would have confused any ordinary human. The walls of the tunnel were lined with pipes, some humming with faint energy. He could feel the warmth radiating from the hatchlings as they nestled close when the air grew cold. Eventually, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber beneath the city. The space was filled with old machinery, discarded robots, and scattered tools. Dust lay thick on the floor, disturbed only by the movement of the hatchlings. Sunlight from above barely reached here, but the faint glow of the hatchlings' scales lit the area. Kyle stood in awe. This was their hidden world, a place humans had long forgotten. The hatchlings flew ahead, landing on beams and platforms. They seemed at home, exploring, testing, and learning. Kyle followed carefully, realizing that the chamber itself was a kind of playground for their intelligence. One hatchling, the amber-eyed one, perched on a beam and chirped at him. Kyle understood the signal. It was time to rest. He placed the platform on a safe spot and let the hatchlings settle. They huddled together, tiny wings folding over each other, creating a warm cluster of shimmering scales. Kyle looked around the chamber, noticing something strange. Among the old machines, there were faint scratches, similar to the ones on the trail above ground. But these were older, as if other hatchlings had used this chamber before. He realized that the hatchlings were not just hiding. They were exploring a place that had been a secret for years. "This place, it's like your home," Kale whispered. "You're not lost. You're just learning." He spent the rest of the day observing them. Each hatchling moved differently. Some climbed along pipes, testing balance. Others hovered in the air, practicing flight patterns. Kale even noticed one small hatchling manipulating a loose wire, almost like it was trying to fix it. The intelligence of these creatures was astonishing. Kyle realized something important. Humans had a unique ability to understand and adapt to their environment. They could think creatively, solve problems, and build connections with other beings. The hatchlings had chosen him, not just for safety, but because he could understand them. They recognized something in humans that other creatures did not: the ability to learn, care, and cooperate. Night fell, and Kale built a small resting area for the hatchlings in the center of the chamber. Using scraps of metal and soft materials, he created nests and perches. The hatchlings explored them curiously, finally settling into their new spots. He covered the chamber with protective barriers he fashioned from old panels, ensuring no drone or human could disturb them. Kyle sat quietly, watching them. The chamber was alive with faint sounds, the fluttering of wings, soft chirps, and the hum of old machinery. For the first time since the hatchlings disappeared, Kale felt a sense of calm. They were safe, and he was learning from them just as much as they were learning from him. He thought about the scientists, the city, and the people searching above ground. They might never understand the intelligence of these creatures, but he did, and that understanding gave him hope. Humans were not just survivors or inventors, they were nurturers, capable of forming bonds that could change the course of life itself. Kale leaned back, resting against a cold metal beam. The hatchlings huddled on their nests, eyes half closed in trust. The chamber was quiet now, except for the occasional flap of tiny wings. Kale smiled. Tomorrow, they would continue exploring. He would follow them further, learning their patterns, discovering their secrets. For now, the city above could wait. Here, underground, humans and dragons shared a moment of trust, curiosity, and cooperation. And Kale knew deep in his heart that this was only the beginning. The hatchlings had vanished for weeks, but now Kale understood. They had not disappeared. They had chosen to teach, to explore, and to connect with a human who could understand them. And in return, Kale would protect them, guide them, and learn from them. As he drifted into a light sleep, the amber-eyed hatchling perched near him, watching quietly. Their tiny presence filled him with a sense of purpose and wonder. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humans and dragons together could discover things neither could alone. And so, deep beneath the city of Lysara, a mechanic and a group of dragon hatchlings began a journey that would change both their worlds forever. The morning light filtered through the broken vents of the hidden chamber, casting soft patterns on the scattered metal and old machinery. The dragon hatchlings stirred, their tiny wings stretching and shimmering in the pale sunlight. Kyle rose from his makeshift resting spot, careful not to startle them. Each hatchling looked at him with bright, intelligent eyes as if greeting an old friend. Kyle had spent days observing their behavior. He noticed patterns in how they moved, how they communicated through chirps and gestures, and how they explored the space. He was amazed at their intelligence. Even in their small forms, the hatchlings showed creativity, curiosity, and adaptability. "This is more than hiding," Kale whispered as he adjusted the platform he had made for them. "You're learning, and you want me to learn too." He had built small pathways using old pipes and panels, allowing the hatchlings to climb, fly, and practice their coordination. Some hatchlings explored independently, while others stayed close to him, their trust in humans growing stronger every day. Kyle realized that these creatures were not only intelligent, they were choosing to interact with him. Today he planned to explore beyond the hidden chamber. He wanted to understand why the hatchlings had disappeared in the first place and what had drawn them to him. Carefully, Kale lifted the platform with the hatchlings, and together they moved through the narrow tunnel that led back toward the upper districts of the city. The hatchlings were cautious, but guided him with small chirps and flutters. Their movements were precise, almost as if they knew exactly where to go. Kale followed, observing every detail, taking mental notes of their reactions and the environment. He noticed that they avoided certain areas, small sections of the tunnel that were unstable or filled with dangerous debris. Finally, they reached an abandoned workshop tucked between two old factories. The workshop had once belonged to a skilled mechanic, known for creating advanced machines and caring for unusual creatures. Kyle recognized the design style. He had seen traces of it in his own work. It was old but familiar, a link between humans who had a unique understanding of machines and life. The hatchlings hovered near the entrance, chirping softly. Kyle understood. They wanted him to enter carefully. He pushed the rusty door open and stepped inside, carrying the platform with the hatchlings. Dust danced in the sunlight that filtered through cracks in the walls. Old machines, unfinished robots, and broken mechanical parts filled the room. Kale placed the platform down and allowed the hatchlings to explore. They moved confidently, landing on beams and peering into small compartments. One hatchling approached a workbench covered with tools and examined a tiny mechanical bird. It chirped, tilted its head, and tapped the bird gently with its claw. The bird responded, flapping its wings and chirping back. Kale smiled. "You recognize machines," he said softly, "and maybe you recognize me." He realized something important. The hatchlings had not just chosen him randomly. They were drawn to humans with skills, patience, and a gentle understanding of life. His work as a mechanic, his care for machines and creatures alike, had made him trustworthy in their eyes. Humans were capable of empathy and problem-solving in ways that other beings could not replicate. This was why the hatchlings had vanished from the facility. They sought connection with someone who could guide and protect them. As Kale observed, he noticed a small corner of the workshop filled with personal items, a notebook, sketches of mechanical designs, and small drawings of dragon hatchlings. The notebook had faded ink, but the sketches were clear. Tiny dragons perched on the creator's shoulder, exploring machinery and interacting with tools. "These were here before," Kyle said aloud, realization dawning. Other humans have done this, connected with creatures like you. He flipped through the notebook carefully. Each page showed a combination of mechanical ingenuity and gentle observation of the hatchlings' behavior. Notes described how the hatchlings learned patterns, responded to gestures, and even began assisting with small tasks. Kale understood now why the hatchlings had disappeared. They were seeking a human who could continue this kind of guidance and care. One hatchling, the amber-eyed one, climbed onto Kale's shoulder, chirping softly. Its tiny claws felt warm against his skin. He smiled. "It's not just about survival," he said. "It's about learning and trust." Kale spent the day exploring the workshop with the hatchlings. He noticed that some old machines still worked with careful adjustments, responding to the hatchlings' movements. A small robotic bird, half broken, fluttered its wings as one hatchling tapped it gently. Another hatchling climbed a mechanical arm, balancing perfectly, testing its limits. The more Kale watched, the more he understood the connection. The hatchlings were intelligent, not only because of their biology, but because humans had the ability to nurture, teach, and inspire growth. Human creativity, patience, and empathy created a bond that no machine or predator could break. As night approached, Kyle built small perches and resting areas in the workshop for the hatchlings. He used soft materials and metal sheets, creating spaces that were safe and comfortable. The hatchlings explored, perched, and eventually settled down, their tiny bodies glowing faintly in the dim light. Kale sat back and observed them. Each hatchling had its personality. Some were bold and curious, climbing and exploring every corner. Others were cautious, staying close to him. Together they formed a small community, learning from each other and from him. He thought about the scientists at the research facility who had panicked when the hatchlings disappeared. They had not realized that intelligence and trust could grow beyond the confines of cages and controlled environments. Humans could foster growth in ways no machine could mimic. The hatchlings had shown him that humans were more than inventors and workers. They were mentors, nurturers, and companions. Kyle reflected on his own journey. He had always worked with machines, but these creatures were different. They were alive, intelligent, and capable of forming connections that machines could not. The responsibility he felt was immense, but so was the opportunity. He could help them grow, understand their potential, and learn from them in return. Late at night, Kale built a small observation station in the workshop. Using scraps of metal and old lights, he created a space where he could study the hatchlings safely. He watched them interact, noting how they communicated through chirps, movements, and gestures. The amber-eyed hatchling perched near him, occasionally tapping his shoulder or climbing onto his arm. "This is just the beginning," Kale whispered. "We have so much to learn from each other." The workshop, once abandoned and silent, was now alive with energy. The hatchlings flitted between perches, chirped in patterns, and explored every corner. Kale adjusted small machines to create gentle sounds, watching how the hatchlings responded. They chirped back, reacting to his adjustments, showing that their intelligence was growing every day. He realized that humans had a unique role in this world. Machines could replicate tasks, but humans could inspire life, growth, and understanding. The hatchlings had chosen him because of this ability. It was not just protection they sought, it was guidance, mentorship, and companionship. As Kyle drifted to sleep that night, he felt a deep sense of purpose. The amber-eyed hatchling curled near his chest, and the others settled around the perches. The workshop was quiet, filled only with soft breathing and the occasional flap of tiny wings. He knew that tomorrow would bring new discoveries. The hatchlings were intelligent, adaptable, and full of potential. With patience, observation, and care, he could help them reach heights no human or dragon had achieved before. And Kale understood something else, something deeper. The hatchlings had not disappeared because they were lost. They had disappeared to find the right human, a human who could understand them, protect them, and grow alongside them. In that quiet, hidden workshop, humans and dragons shared a secret bond, one of trust, intelligence, and connection. Kyle smiled softly as he closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the hatchlings against his chest. Together they would explore not only the city, but the possibilities of learning, growth, and cooperation. The journey was just beginning, and Kale felt ready. Humans had the ability to inspire, protect, and understand. And these hatchlings had reminded him of that truth. Beneath the city of Lysara, in an abandoned workshop that now glowed softly with the presence of life, Kale and the dragon hatchlings began a new chapter of discovery, one that would change both humans and dragons forever. Morning came slowly to Lysara, with sunlight spilling through the high towers and reflecting off the city's glass and metal surfaces. Kale rose from his makeshift resting spot in the hidden workshop. The hatchlings stirred, their wings stretching and tiny claws gripping the edges of the perches he had made for them. They chirped softly, a gentle greeting to their human companion. Kyle smiled and carefully lifted the platform he had built for them. Today he planned to explore the city with them, slowly and carefully, giving them the freedom to test their abilities while keeping them safe. The hatchlings chirped excitedly as if they understood the day's plan. Together, they moved through the narrow tunnels beneath the city. The hatchlings guided Kyle with their precise movements, flapping ahead and pausing to ensure he could follow. He noticed how careful they were, avoiding broken panels, loose wires, and other hazards. Their intelligence was remarkable, and Kyle realized that humans and dragons could learn from one another in ways that no one had imagined. The tunnels opened onto the rooftops of the lower districts. Kale carefully stepped out, holding the hatchlings on the platform. The city stretched out below, busy with activity. Citizens moved about, oblivious to the small group perched above. Kyle watched as the hatchlings took tentative flights between rooftops, testing their wings and balance. One hatchling, the amber-eyed one, hovered near Kale's shoulder, chirping softly. Kale smiled. "You're ready to explore," he whispered. "But stay close. We don't know who's watching." As they moved across the rooftops, Kale noticed how the hatchlings responded to the environment. They avoided the drone patrols, navigated around electrical lines, and even anticipated sudden gusts of wind. It was clear that their intelligence was growing rapidly. They were not just small creatures. They were observers, learners, and problem solvers. Kyle decided to test their abilities further. He placed a small device on a rooftop, a puzzle of simple levers and buttons designed to see if the hatchlings could interact with machines. One by one, they approached, chirping softly. The boldest hatchling tapped a lever with its tiny claw. The device clicked, and a small mechanical bird fluttered out. The hatchling chirped excitedly and nudged it back toward Kale. Kale laughed softly. "You're learning fast," he said, "faster than anyone expected." They continued their exploration, moving through alleys, over bridges, and across the tops of buildings. People on the streets below noticed small flashes of color, but thought them reflections or unusual birds. No one realized that dragon hatchlings, intelligent and curious, were flying above them, learning and interacting with the world. At one point, they reached a marketplace where citizens sold mechanical parts, gadgets, and small machines. The hatchlings hovered cautiously, observing the humans. Some of the smaller hatchlings landed on counters, curious about the items. Kyle watched carefully, ensuring that no one noticed them too closely. A vendor glanced up, noticing the small, shimmering creatures. "What are those?" he asked. Kyle smiled politely. "Just some rare creatures passing through," he said, guiding the hatchlings gently along the path. The vendor shrugged, assuming they were a local invention or rare birds. Kyle knew better. The hatchlings were learning, observing, and understanding human behavior. They moved to a quieter section of the city, where old buildings leaned closely together and narrow alleys created shadows. The hatchlings explored eagerly, climbing pipes, perching on ledges, and chirping in small patterns. Kyle realized that they were testing their environment, practicing flight, and even communicating with one another. The amber-eyed hatchling perched on his shoulder, chirping softly. Kyle placed a hand on its tiny back. "You're teaching me as much as I'm teaching you," he said, "and together we'll learn more." Kyle decided to introduce the hatchlings to a simple challenge. He placed small objects across a rooftop, scraps of metal, gears, and tiny mechanical pieces. The hatchlings approached, curious and cautious. One tapped a piece with its claw, and it rolled toward another hatchling. They chirped in delight, moving the pieces around as if playing a game of cooperation. Kyle observed closely. Their coordination, problem-solving, and communication were more advanced than he had expected. The hatchlings were learning from each other and from him, developing skills that would help them navigate the world safely. As the day passed, Kale guided them across the city, teaching them to avoid hazards, recognize safe spaces, and interact with machines. The hatchlings responded quickly, showing signs of understanding and adaptation. Kyle realized that this bond between humans and dragons was something special, an example of what humans could achieve through patience, empathy, and observation. By evening, they reached a quiet rooftop overlooking the cliffs. The ocean glimmered in the distance, and the sky was painted with shades of orange and pink. The hatchlings perched on the platform, chirping softly and preening their wings. Kyle sat beside them, watching the city below. "This is what it means to connect," he said softly. "Humans can inspire growth, and creatures like you can teach us about intelligence and trust. Together we can learn more than we ever could alone." The hatchlings responded with gentle chirps, as if acknowledging his words. Kale felt a warmth in his chest, a sense of purpose and wonder. The connection between humans and dragons was more than protection. It was mutual learning, respect, and understanding. As night fell, Kale guided the hatchlings back to the hidden workshop. They moved carefully, avoiding drone patrols and other dangers. Once inside, Kale built small nests and perches, ensuring that each hatchling had a safe space to rest. They settled in quickly, curling together in a warm, glowing cluster. Kale watched them for a while, reflecting on the day. The hatchlings had not just survived, they had learned, adapted, and interacted in ways that were remarkable for creatures their size. He realized that humans had a unique ability to foster growth and intelligence, not through force or control, but through patience, empathy, and guidance. He thought about the scientists who had panicked when the hatchlings disappeared. They had focused on security and containment, not understanding and connection. Kale understood now that the hatchlings had chosen him because of his ability to guide, protect, and learn with them. The workshop was quiet, filled with the soft sounds of tiny wings and gentle chirps. Kale leaned back against a metal beam, exhausted but satisfied. The city outside was alive with noise and activity, but here, in this hidden space, humans and dragons shared something extraordinary. Kale smiled as the amber-eyed hatchling curled near his chest. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "we'll explore more, learn more, and grow together. Humans and dragons. We can achieve amazing things if we trust and understand each other." The hatchlings chirped softly, a sound that filled the workshop with life and energy. Kale felt a deep sense of purpose. The bond between them was not just about survival, it was about learning, cooperation, and connection. And as he drifted into a light sleep, Kale knew that this was only the beginning. The city of Lysara might never understand the intelligence of these creatures, but he did. Humans had the power to inspire, nurture, and grow alongside other beings. The hatchlings had shown him that, and he would continue to learn from them every day. Beneath the glowing lights of the city and the quiet hum of machines, Kale and the dragon hatchlings shared a bond that went beyond words. It was trust, curiosity, and mutual understanding. And together, they would explore, discover, and grow, proving that humans were not just survivors or inventors, but mentors, companions, and catalysts for life. The workshop was alive with soft light and gentle movement. The hatchlings rested and dreamed, while Kale planned the next day's exploration. Together, they had begun a journey that would change their world, showing that humans and dragons could achieve incredible things when they worked together. The city of Lysara shimmered under the soft morning sun, the towers reflecting light in warm golden and silver hues. Kyle stood on a rooftop, watching the dragon hatchlings perched on the platform he had built. Today, he had decided they would return to the research facility, but this time, it would not be a hurried or fearful return. Today, it would be with trust, knowledge, and care. The hatchlings stirred, chirping softly and flapping their wings in anticipation. They had grown stronger, more intelligent, and more confident since their disappearance. Kyle had taught them, yes, but they had also taught him. They had shown him the true meaning of patience, trust, and cooperation. Kyle lifted the platform carefully, ensuring that the hatchlings were comfortable and secure. They moved together, a small team navigating the rooftops of the city. People below glanced up in curiosity, noticing flashes of shimmering scales and tiny wings. But most assumed it was some rare form of technology or an unusual bird. The path to the research facility was long and filled with potential hazards. Drone patrols monitored the streets, and the city's automated security systems could easily mistake the hatchlings for rogue devices. Kyle guided them carefully, teaching them to react to movement, recognize danger, and use the environment to their advantage. The hatchlings followed his instructions with surprising intelligence, demonstrating the lessons they had learned over weeks of freedom. By midday, they reached the outskirts of the city, where the facility stood tall atop the cliffs. Its glass and steel structure gleamed in the sunlight, and drones hovered in a steady patrol. Kale paused, observing the guards and security systems. The hatchlings chirped softly, sensing his hesitation. He knelt down and whispered, "We'll do this carefully. Trust me." With gentle guidance, Kale led the hatchlings closer. They flew low and moved in coordinated patterns, weaving through gaps in drone patrols and landing on ledges near the facility's entrance. The hatchlings were cautious but confident, showing the skill and intelligence they had developed. Inside the facility, the scientists were still searching frantically for the missing creatures. Dr. Leora paced the floor, worried and exhausted. "How could they vanish like this?" she muttered. "No drone recorded anything. They just disappeared." Kyle entered quietly, holding the platform with the hatchlings. He approached the central chamber where the scientists had gathered. The hatchlings chirped softly, their small wings fluttering. At first, the scientists were stunned, unable to believe their eyes. Then, recognition and relief filled the room. "They're here, and they're safe," Dr. Leora exclaimed, rushing forward. Kale placed the platform carefully on a table. The hatchlings explored it, chirping and peering at the humans. They were not afraid. They trusted Kale, and that trust extended to the humans around him. It was clear that the creatures had grown, not just physically, but in intelligence and understanding. The scientists examined the hatchlings, noting their development. Their wings were stronger, their movements precise, and their behaviors more coordinated than ever. They were learning, observing, and interacting in ways that the scientists had never expected. Kyle explained their journey, the hidden chambers, and how the hatchlings had chosen him. "This is remarkable," Dr. Leora said, her eyes wide with amazement. "They have evolved faster than anticipated and under your guidance. You've shown us that human interaction can accelerate their learning and intelligence." Kale nodded. "They trusted me, not because I forced them, but because I understood them. Humans have a unique ability to nurture, guide, and inspire growth. That's what they responded to." The hatchlings chirped, as if agreeing with him. They moved among the humans, exploring cautiously but showing signs of recognition and connection. Some climbed onto shoulders, while others perched on tables or beams. The scientists watched in awe. The creatures were not just alive. They were partners, learners, and companions. Kyle spent hours with them, teaching small tasks and observing their behavior. The hatchlings demonstrated problem-solving skills, coordination, and communication that amazed everyone. They moved as a group, worked together, and even responded to subtle cues from Kyle. By evening, the facility began to calm. The hatchlings rested in a specially prepared area, their scales glowing faintly in the dim light. Kyle stood nearby, observing them. The bond between humans and dragons was clear. Trust, patience, and understanding had bridged the gap between species. Dr. Leora approached Kyle. "You've done something extraordinary," she said softly. "You didn't just protect them. You taught them, guided them, and showed us the true potential of human interaction." Kyle smiled. "They taught me too," he replied. "Intelligence, curiosity, and trust. They respond to those things. Humans have the ability to inspire that. And that's what they needed." The hatchlings stirred, chirping softly and exploring their surroundings. They approached the humans carefully, recognizing gestures and movements. Kale noticed how they communicated not just with chirps, but with subtle movements, gestures that indicated understanding and connection. The facility became a place of learning, not just for the hatchlings, but for the humans as well. Scientists observed, documented, and recorded the behavior of the creatures. They realized that human guidance could unlock potential in ways they had never imagined. The hatchlings were a living example of cooperation, intelligence, and growth. As night fell, Kale sat quietly near the resting hatchlings. He reflected on the journey, from the first alarmed morning when they disappeared, to the hidden chambers, and finally, to this moment of trust and understanding. Humans had the ability to nurture, inspire, and guide. The hatchlings had chosen him, not because of strength or power, but because of patience, empathy, and intelligence. He watched as the amber-eyed hatchling curled near his chest, its small body glowing softly. The others rested nearby, calm and content. Kale felt a deep sense of purpose. The bond between humans and dragons had been tested, strengthened, and proven. Together, they could achieve incredible things. The city outside the facility continued its rhythm, unaware of the extraordinary events that had unfolded. But within these walls, a new understanding had emerged. Humans were not just caretakers or observers, they were partners, teachers, and catalysts for growth. The hatchlings had shown them that connection and trust could unlock potential beyond imagination. Kyle leaned back, resting against a table. The hatchlings chirped softly, moving around him with familiarity and comfort. He realized that this was more than a rescue. It was the beginning of a new chapter. Humans and dragons working together, learning from each other, could face the challenges of the world with intelligence, cooperation, and trust. The scientists gathered, taking careful notes and observing interactions. The hatchlings responded to each gesture, demonstrating understanding and adaptability. It was clear that human guidance had shaped them, but the process had been mutual. The hatchlings had inspired humans as much as humans had inspired them. As the night deepened, Kale watched the hatchlings settle into their nests. Their small wings folded and their eyes closed, glowing faintly in the dim light. He smiled softly. Tomorrow would bring new lessons, new discoveries, and more opportunities to explore the bond between species. For the first time since the alarm had sounded weeks ago, Kale felt a sense of completion. The hatchlings were safe, intelligent, and thriving. They had learned from humans, but humans had learned from them as well. The journey had proven that cooperation, patience, and empathy were among the greatest strengths of humanity. Kyle whispered softly, "We did it together." The hatchlings chirped in response, a sound of acknowledgement, trust, and connection. Beneath the glowing lights of Lysara, in the heart of the research facility, humans and dragon hatchlings shared a moment of triumph. A bond had been forged, one that would influence the future of their world. Intelligence, trust, and cooperation had triumphed over fear and uncertainty. Kyle looked out at the city, knowing that this was just the beginning. Humans and dragons would continue to explore, learn, and grow together. The hatchlings had returned, but they had also changed the humans who had cared for them. And as he sat quietly, surrounded by small wings and shimmering scales, Kyle understood the greatest lesson of all. Humans had the power to inspire, protect, and nurture life, and in doing so they could unlock the extraordinary potential of the world around them. The city slept, the facility was quiet, and the hatchlings rested. But in the hearts of humans and dragons alike, a new understanding had taken root. A reminder that cooperation, trust, and empathy could achieve what machines, fear, or force never could. Kale smiled as he drifted into sleep, the amber-eyed hatchling curled against his chest. Together, they had discovered the truth of humanity, that humans were not just survivors or builders, but mentors, companions, and partners in the adventure of life. And in that quiet, glowing facility, beneath the towers of Lysara, a small group of humans and dragons dreamed of a future where understanding, intelligence, and trust could change the world, one connection at a time.